that we were talking about. Now, going through the basal nuclei, we have these channels, quote, parallel channels. And it has to do with signals coming in and signals going out, and where they're relayed and what they target. So the motor channel, somatosensory input in, primary motor cortex signals in, premotor cortex signals in, they come to the putamen. From there they pass, this is the same here, okay? It's all the same. And then they pass through the ventrolateral, ventral anterior nuclei in the thalamus, go back to the premotor cortex and the primary motor cortex. This pathway primarily is involved with essentially feedback, primary motor in, primary motor out, that is going to help control the amount of movement that you see. Does that make some sense? We have somatosensory, so I have to move. I'm moving in response to somatosensation. Primary motor and premotor has to do with why am I moving and what am I moving. All right? All of these lead to, once again, going back to why am I moving, what I'm moving. So you get a feedback that says, okay, take it easy. You don't have to hit it. 100 miles an hour is too much. Let's do 60. Oculomotor channel is going to affect your eye fields in the frontal cortex. Okay? Parietal channels coming in, prefrontal channels coming into the caudate now. So the putamen is involved with the motor channel going to the premotor cortex and the primary motor cortex. The caudate is involved with the oculomotor, which is eye fields. That should make sense. So that you're, oculomotor, you're moving the eyes. The prefrontal channel, in many respects, is a behavioral reward system in part channel. Similar inputs here, coming to the head of the caudate, going to the prefrontal cortex. Okay, this is appropriate. This is an appropriate response. And finally, the limbic channel. Signals from the temporal lobe, which are going to be overwhelmingly olfactory signals. The hippocampus and the amygdala. These are going to be memory signals and fear signals, signals involved with reward channeling as well. Come to the nucleus accumbens, ventral part of the caudate nucleus, the ventral part of the putamen, and they go out to the anterior cingulate gyrus and the orbital frontal cortex. Orbital frontal cortex is going to help you target your response. Cingulate gyrus, you remember, is the main gyrus involved with the limbic system. We haven't gone into great detail on that, but we will. So you can look then at how the signals coming out are affecting the brain. And what you see is that the signals coming through the entire basal nuclear area essentially affects the whole forebrain. It's sending signals out that are behaviorally associated with movement, with appropriate movement or appropriate behavioral movements. So it's overwhelmingly associated with these motor areas. So here's this limbic channel. This is cingulate gyrus, supplemental motor area up here, but we have all sorts of signaling. This is all limbic. This is limbic. Okay, motor channel, yeah. Primary motor, supplemental motor, or motor association areas, prefrontal area. This involves just a tremendous amount of appropriate behaviors. Okay, so you have, I don't know, you're at a party, you've had your favorite form of intoxicant, you blurt out something that is really stupid, or something that was inappropriate. Huh. Makes perfect sense. What's this? Broca's area. What's Broca in charge of? You're talking. All right? Signal's coming. Well, let's open the mouth up, get some words out. Inappropriately. Okay. All right? There are some major problems. This is as far as we're going today. I want you to take a look at examples. These four issues we're going to be going over in more detail on Wednesday, but I want you to at least get started with these. Parkinson's, dopaminergic neuron degeneration in the substantia nigra. You are getting inappropriate amounts of signaling from the substantia nigra to the striatum. This signaling is almost irrelevant. This signaling is outrageously relevant. Okay? The signal's here. If this excitatory signal doesn't come in, what's the chance this is going to happen? Pretty good. You got a signal from the cortex, you got a signal from within the striatum. You got plenty of signaling going on to guarantee this inhibition. However, if this inhibition doesn't happen, this pathway falls apart. With Parkinson's, you tend to... Parkinson's is really an intriguing disorder. With the early stages of Parkinson's, we tend to treat it with L-Dopa. This is a precursor to making dopamine. Now you go, wait a minute, why don't I just give the person dopamine? You're not producing enough dopamine in the pathway. And the reason for that is dopamine does not cross the blood-brain barrier. And you go, oh, wait a minute, this is stupid for a neurotransmitter. Well, it is. But in your kidneys, dopamine is not used as a neurotransmitter. It's used hormonally for something else. So think about it. If dopamine could freely cross your blood-brain barrier, your substantia nigra would be controlling your kidneys, and your kidneys would be controlling your movement. Now, granted, when you really have to pee, that would be really nice, but that's not the normal state. So with Parkinson's, what happens is initially you have a reduced amount of dopamine being produced in the pathway. Okay. Now, as it turns out, with neurons, with a given neuron, you have feedback. And the feedback says, hey, we had an effect. Cool. And that feedback can be from the synapse, it can be from astrocytes, it can be a variety of ways. It can be a signal that comes back. And when a group of neurons quits getting feedback, they start to degenerate. Once those neurons start to degenerate, they start to produce even less neurotransmitter. So what happens with Parkinson's initially is that you get this reduced production of dopamine. Okay. For whatever reason. Signals are coming through. The initial response is typically some tremor. If you respond quickly, by quickly I mean you go have appropriate medical treatment, you'll be put on L-Dopa. L-Dopa will come in to those cells that have started the degeneration process. L-Dopa will come in it will help to keep your dopamine levels higher. But now let's say instead you're an all-natural person. You go, no, I'm not going to take any drugs. Well, your Parkinson's disease accelerates. If you don't take the L-DOPA initially, you're going to see degeneration of the pathway. L-DOPA does not prevent the degeneration. Well, actually, it prevents it at a rate to where degeneration is slower. Does that make some sense? All right. What happens ultimately is that the amount of dopamine being made decreases, and Parkinson's is a progressive disease. I want to save hemiballismus for later because it's slightly different from the other two here. The initial stages of Parkinson's, Huntington's, and ALS are very similar. Spastic movement. So, in Huntington's disease, which is a genetic disorder, we see degeneration of the striatum. So we still have plenty of signals coming from substantia nigra, but we see a degeneration of this enkephalin signaling pathway. Oh, well, that's cool. If this is degenerating, then this is going to not function properly. And it doesn't matter what other signals we have coming in. Huntington's tends to start at an earlier age than Parkinson's. So of the three of these diseases, Parkinson's, Huntington's, and ALS, Parkinson's tends to start the latest. Huntington's effects tend to show up earlier, ALS earliest. Huntington's will progress to become a completely disabling disorder that will impact life expectancy probably by 10 to 20 years. It has tremendous facial and speech pattern implications early on. And the arm movements become very, very restricted. They covered Huntington's really well in House. Have you ever watched House? Okay. 13 had Huntington's. And she would go to the clinic and work with people there. So, ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, involves reduced signaling from the cortex to the striatum. Of the three diseases, ALS has the most rapid and devastating progression. ALS historically was called Lou Gehrig's disease. Baseball player who started showing symptoms when he was 37, 38, died when he was 39, 40. So, yeah, it's a very rapid progression. So, we have signals coming into the striatum from the substantia nigra. We have degeneration of the substantia nigra, or we have signals coming in from the cortex. By reducing any or all of those signals, we're affecting these pathways. So we're getting much, much less signaling coming out. Initially, at kind of the high point in the disease, any of these disease processes, we see very spastic movements because there is no means of controlling signaling. Okay? Please, this is a difficult chapter to read through appropriately. Take your time, go through it.